Is trading down the best draft strategy for the Chicago Bears? We talk about that next on the Unbearable Sports podcast.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron, and welcome back to a Mock Draft Monday, where we go through a potential scenario for the Chicago Bears on draft day that is quickly coming up on April 28th. So welcome back in. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever it is. Make sure to rate it 5 stars. It helps so much as we continue to expand the audience. So thank you all so much. But we have a fun little exercise that we're doing this week, because last week we had 5 different mock drafts that we are ranking from different media outlets and saying which one do we like the most. But today, we're going through, no matter what, we're trading the first pick that the Bears have, no matter what. No matter what the circumstances, we're trading back and accumulating picks, and we're seeing what would happen if the Bears traded down, and is it a good strategy? Because personally, I'm a bigger fan of trading down than trading up, because the draft is really a crapshoot. You don't know who's going to be good. You can still kind of see, okay, these people are very talented, but there's so much that goes into the scheme, into the coaching staff, that you really don't know. And a good explanation, a good display of this is with free agency. You see people that are good go to a situation and all of a sudden they flop. They don't do as well. That's why just because you sign the biggest name free agents doesn't mean that they're going to translate to your system, because football is a crazy, crazy game. And that's why the draft is really more of a crapshoot than a lot of people and a lot of experts care to kind of admit to all of this. But obviously you want to be smart with your draft picks, but I'm not a huge fan of trading up unless it's for a quarterback like we did with Justin Fields. You trade up for a generational prospect, and quarterbacks can really transform your organization. But it's not a smart decision to trade up when it's just one pick, when there's 3 other quarterbacks of similar caliber already on the board. Ryan Pace. So really what we'll do is we will trade down, and we're just going to compare what happens with these picks. So let's get started. So I'm using the Mock Draft Simulator on PFF. I've said that I personally like the Draft Simulator on TDN's website, but you have to pay extra to trade down, so I'm not going to pay extra for that. So we are just going to use this. We're using the default settings. We're going 7 rounds with the Chicago Bears, and no matter what, we are trading that first pick. So let's start the draft. And there it goes. We're starting to fly down, and now we are on the clock. Let's first just see who went before the Bears, just what's been going on in round 2. So right now we see Boye Mafe from the Minnesota Golden Gophers, the edge. He's gone to the Jags. Daxton Hill, a cornerback out of Michigan, has gone. Sam Howell, quarterback, North Carolina. Zion Johnson, that's a really late fall for him to go 36 to the Giants. Desmond Ridder out of Cincinnati, the quarterback, has gone as well. Jahan Dotson out of Penn State, the wide receiver, going 1 pick before the Chicago Bears. Now, if Dotson is there, Dotson or Zion Johnson, I feel like the Bears would just sprint up and turn in that card, because Dotson is a first-round caliber talent. Zion Johnson, first-round caliber talent. So let's just see who's on the board, though, for the Bears. I'm also concede that I have 3 trade offers. That's not good. We'll see how this goes. I also wanted to just check what quarterbacks are still on the board, just because I'm hoping that more quarterbacks go early. Because when more quarterbacks go early, that means that more position players will fall to the Bears. So really, Matt Corral out of Mississippi is still on the board out of all those kind of like first round, quote unquote, first round caliber quarterbacks. So let's just see who's available at positions of need. So if we go to wide receiver, you're kind of seeing a lot of these expected types of wide receivers. Sky Moore, projected to go around pick 37, so he's a slot receiver, more of a slot receiver out of Western Michigan, still on the board. George Pickens, I'm starting to fall in love with him because of him being more of a possession guy, but still has the speed that the Bears want out of a wide receiver. Goes around pick 45, so usually expect to see him on this board. Jalen Tolbert, the wide receiver out of South Alabama. Christian Watson, wide receiver, physical freak out of North Dakota State. But let's just go through a couple of the other spots as well. Let's look at offensive line. Abraham Lucas, the tackle out of Washington State, is still on the board. He's someone that is a very good scheme fit, a very athletic type of a tackle that I could see a Ryan Poles falling in love with. Besides that, not a lot of other people would be kind of on the board. Dylan Parham, Darian Kennard, those guys go a little bit later in kind of late second round, so kind of expect to see them on the board right now. But let's open up the secondary. We definitely need secondary help, and the people that we see, Jalen Petrie, the cornerback / safety out of Baylor, Jaquan Brisker, the safety out of Penn State, seen as one of the top safeties in this draft class. Roger McCreary and Kyler Gordon, both corners. McCreary out of Auburn and Gordon out of Washington. We've talked about Gordon last time. He's someone that is more of a zone type of guy that would be a very good scheme fit here, and also a very good physical person, but needs to work on the vision a little bit more. And McCreary, a very good mirror, man-to-man type of a player that could be great for the Bears. These guys are probably all going to go before our next pick. So if I'm a betting man, I think that the linebackers might be our best. The corners might be our best spot. So we're going to do a quote unquote fake pick just to see what we could have had at this selection as we trade out of it. Logan Hall, defensive interior out of Houston, and Perion Winfrey, defensive interior, very quick first step out of Oklahoma. Logan Hall is just kind of a tweener. That's the only thing that scares me, but he's still a very tall, physical freak. Reminds me a little bit of Aaron Lynch, where he's kind of that tweener, big body type of a guy. But let's go to inside linebacker. Leo Chenal out of Wisconsin, Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma, Chad Muma out of Wyoming, Christian Harris out of Alabama. Lots and lots of interior linebackers for the Chicago Bears if they wanted that pick. But what we're going to do is we are going to trade down. So before we trade down, I'm actually just going to take a screenshot. What I'm going to assume is that the Chicago Bears are probably, if they're at this position, I'm guessing that if they're going to truly go with best player available, maybe we go with a corner like a Petrie, like a Brisker, someone like that. Just Brisker as a safety, you then have that safety position locked down, and he's someone for Eberflus's defense. But let's also go to wide receiver. This is also where I could say we need people for Justin Fields. So I really think that this is another spot that they could say, let's go Sky Moore, or let's go, I could see George Pickens or Christian Watson, ideally for the Bears here. You're talking about a physical freak in Watson and a very good player with George Pickens. So to me, my fake pick that we're going to compare against is really Pickens, Watson, Brisker, or Petrie because of the versatility and because of the area of need. But let's see our trade options. We are getting trade offers from the Indianapolis Colts, Minnesota Vikings, and the Detroit Lions. So let's just see, because I want to actually trade down and try and get as many picks as possible. So the Minnesota Vikings have a lot of picks later on, and same with the Lions. But I think for sake of realism, I think that the Colts might be a good team to kind of trade with. So let's see. I'm actually just going to select all of these late round picks, and let's see what else we can get. So right now we have a 45% chance for this trade going through. Now I can definitely add more picks to this, but right now we're looking at trading pick 39 for pick 42, 122, 159, 179, 216, and 240. To me, this is very unrealistic, but this is not me. This is actually the PFF one. They're saying, hey, there's a 45% chance that this goes through. Part of me is also tempted to just literally go with pick 73 because I feel that's more realistic. But we're just going to trade back and we're going to see what we can get with all these extra picks. So we're trading one pick, trading down just 3 picks, but we're getting a haul of late round picks. So 122, 159, 179, 216, and 240. Let's offer this trade, and it's been accepted. So let's resume this trade. We're now back to we are at pick 42. What happened during that time? Matt Corral out of Mississippi went. Roger McCreary out of Auburn has went, and Breece Hall, the running back out of Iowa State, has left as well. So we just traded down 3 picks. Yet again, this is all random. This is also a lot easier than it is in real life. We got to be fully aware of that. But now, as we're looking, a lot of the players that we still liked are still on the board. Keep in mind, too, our next pick is pick 48. So now we can start to select different players that we might want. Now, we talked about this before because not a lot of people have gone off the board. I am a big fan of Jalen Petrie as a corner because of his versatility at safety and at the cornerback position. So to me, he's kind of the pick for me because I think Sky Moore might not be a great fit because we already have a slot corner. And yes, you can kind of have some versatility, but I don't think right now there's a lot of there's still a handful of wide receivers that are still available that I'm hoping are available at pick 48. And Jaquan Brisker, I am actually tempted for him as well, but I like the idea of Jalen Petrie being a little bit more positional versatile out there. He's also 6 feet tall and 197 pounds, and we've seen this, that the Bears do like bigger corners similar to a Jalen Petrie. Even though that Brisker is 6'1", 200 pounds, I still like the idea of at least going with Petrie. So he's going to be the pick right here, and I'm going to hope that wide receivers are available, and chances are they're probably going. And yes, George Pickens has been selected right after the Bears to the Falcons, and Jaquan Brisker has been selected by the Browns, and Logan Hall, defensive interior out of Houston, has been selected. Same with Sky Moore and Leo Chenal. So right now the Bears are looking pretty at pick 48. So wide receivers, what wide receivers are still available? We have Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama and Christian Watson. Now the average draft position, PFF is saying 77.6, but honestly, I don't see him dropping that far. Now, I'm also going to grab just some offensive linemen to see who's available. We can go Abraham Lucas, who I think is going to be a top tier type of a player. There's Tyler Smith, who's still available to us, and Dylan Parham, Darian Kennard, and Abraham Lucas. So what I'm looking for right now, let's actually just go wide receiver. I feel bad because I skipped out on a George Pickens. I skipped out on a Sky Moore, and I know that there's a lot of Watson fans out there, and I like the athletic profile. This is not exactly what I would do, but this is someone that we need help at wide receiver, so let's go with the physical freak of Christian Watson, who should be kind of going around this area. We're going to go wide receiver, and there we go. He's now selected, and the picks are going through. So now, a couple picks before us, we see Perrion Winfrey, defensive interior, going from Oklahoma. We're seeing Jalen Tolbert, someone who's a very good outside wide receiver out of South Alabama, going around there as well. Petit Ferrer, the Ohio State tackle, leaving there. Troy Anderson, linebacker out of Montana State. And Abraham Lucas going at pick 65 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we are on the board at pick 71. I won't go too in depth after some of these picks, but we'll see. So let's actually just look at offensive linemen who's still available. Dylan Parham, the guard out of Memphis, guard/tackle. Very athletic, good scheme fit out here. Then we have Jamari Salyer, the tackle, kind of right tackle and guard out of Georgia. Kellen Deesh, very athletic tackle out of Arizona. And Cole Strange is someone who is very highly athletic interior that would look very, very good inside of this offense. But let's see, Max Mitchell, another very solid type of player for offensive line. Let's see with wide receivers. Who's still on the board? Justin Ross, the wide receiver out of Clemson. Alec Pierce, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati. But we already have one that we're kind of banking on. Something that's interesting to see here too. Before, every time I'd run a mock draft about a week ago, there was always wide receivers so kind of the Jalen Tolberts and other players like that would fall to the Bears. What it's looking like more and more is that these guys that you see right now, Justin Ross, Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir, Calvin Austin, very good athlete. A lot of these wide receivers are this is the caliber of wide receivers that you see here. Ryan Poles talked about being selective in the draft and seeing just kind of the overall depth. So that might mean that he's trying to go after a Pickens, a Sky Moore, a Christian Watson earlier in that second round type of a range. So that's why I could see maybe he is going to go wide receiver with some of those second round picks. But let's not go wide receiver for ourselves. Let's actually drop down to the secondary, even though that we got a player with Petrie. Just want to see who's available. And this is where we're seeing Kirby Joseph, safety out of Illinois, Nick Cross, safety out of Maryland, kind of a big thumper, Marcus Jones, cornerback out of Houston, Brian Cook, safety out of Cincinnati. This is where, too, I know a lot of people love the idea of the Bears getting like interior or just like offensive linemen early. We're still seeing some talent at offensive line that's still available to us later. While like the defensive backs, there's not as many good players. Kobe Bryant is someone to at least keep an eye out on. But as you're going through here, Mario Goodrich is a decent player. Smoke Monday just has an amazing name. But not a lot of there's definitely a drop off, in my opinion, from the second round to later. So to me, when you're just looking at this, I know it's easy to say we need offensive linemen, but if you're looking at where people are going, and yes, this is one mock draft, but if you do multiple of these, you start to see that a lot of these players, it's really the cornerbacks and wide receivers that I personally feel there's a big drop off in some of that talent. So hopefully the Bears are seeing that and saying, hey, maybe we should select some of these players. But let's see. Linebacker, I'm a Brandon Asamoah fan. He's a very physical freak. So to me, this is hard because I'm not a big fan of getting somebody at a position, specifically at a position of need with like offensive linemen. But honestly here, I'm kind of going back and forth. I like Salyer because of the position versatility. And you've seen with every player that really Poles has gone after, he really prioritizes that versatility. We saw that with Bates as a tackle, as a guard that could play everywhere. It played some center in the preseason games, and also going after Lucas Patrick, who also has that versatility. I'm actually just going best player available. I like Asamoah. I just love the idea of having that speedy guy at the linebacker position, and we don't have a third linebacker in a 4-3 system. Like, we have nobody there. So to me, I'm filling in the glaring holes that we have. And I'm also really curious what offensive linemen are still available as we start going later on. So here's one of our picks from Indy in the 4th round that we got, pick 122. So what we're seeing right now, just some of the top people available. Donovan West out of Arizona State, Zach Tom, a very showed off a lot of athleticism at the combine, someone that really stuck out for a lot of players, for a lot of people just watching that. We see Chris Paul that some people have mocked to the Chicago Bears, but really a lot of the best players available that we're seeing are offensive linemen. Jelani Woods, ooh, that's tempting. The tight end out of Virginia. He is a tree. He is 6'7", 265, just an absolute tree of a man. So that's why I'm actually fairly interested in him because of even though that we don't absolutely need a tight end, he's someone that's interesting. We need a backup at least, and that's why I could see him being selected, because he's similar to a Mo Alley Cox. Cam Jurgens, a center out of Nebraska. Very athletic, very quick, rising up draft boards after an amazing combine performance. I believe he had the fastest 40 time out of any offensive lineman that was out there. And then Marquise Bell, another good safety. But let's actually just scroll back up to the top. I think a Zach Tom would be good right here. Top tier type of a player that would be seen as kind of a steal there. Jelani Woods is just too tempting. I'm hoping that he's still around when the Bears come around, but let's go with Zach Tom, the tackle out of Wake Forest. But as we saw there, later on, this is where I'm also a big fan of, you just go best player available with a lot of this, because majority of these players aren't going to be starting for you. So I'm looking at just best player available who can provide some depth that we could be getting out here. So now we're at pick 148, a pick that I believe that we got from the Colts because it's from Houston. So here, let's just see top players available. Yet again, we're seeing Cordell Flott, a cornerback out of LSU, Grant Calcaterra, the tight end out of SMU, a very good player that we could potentially be getting. Pierre Strong has been coming up a lot of draft boards. But right now I'm looking to see, is our tight end still available to us? And the answer is no. He is not available. I'm actually this might be seen as a reach for some, but I really like this player. I think that he's very athletic, very big-bodied, 6'3", 205, the safety out of Florida A&M, Marquise Bell. I'm a big fan of him. This is just my own bias coming through. I think that you add him as honestly, he can compete for that starting spot, but even though that we already had Petrie can play that cornerback position. That's why I'm going with Bell. As we go later on, these picks are just hard to kind of say, okay, this guy's going to start, this guy's not going to start. So let's just keep on going through with some of these players, some other people that are still available. It's just a hodgepodge of people down here, to be honest with you. So we're just going to go with the best players available. We're going with tight end Grant Calcaterra out of SMU, just because we need a little bit more depth. And then now we're on to another Indianapolis pick that we traded, the Chicago Bears with pick 159. And as I'm looking out here, let's go with another offensive lineman. We're going with Chris Paul, tackle out of Tulsa. So adding him as well. Yet again, this is just where, like, when you trade for these picks, now we're at pick 179, a compensatory pick we got at the very end of round 5 from the Indianapolis Colts. Lots and lots of players out here. We need some interior depth. So let's go. Actually, let me see if there's any specific wide receivers. Bo Melton, this might be a little bit of a reach, not so much. Let's go Bo Melton, the wide receiver out of Rutgers. He's been a player that a lot of Bears fans really are starting to like. 5'11", just a blaze of speed that we want on this team. Let's go and get some weapons to compete with our other weapons that the Bears have been signing. And now we can go back to Otito Ogbonai out of UCLA, a defensive interior player, just to add a little bit of depth. And now we are all the way down to pick 216, which is another Indianapolis Colts selection. And the big person that is showing up on our radar has got to be the punter, Matt Araiza, San Diego State, the punt god himself. And guys, this guy, I don't like drafting punters. I don't like drafting punters, but this guy can seriously boot it, 70, like legit 70 yards. He is absolutely incredible, can play kicker in a pinch. I'm going with him just because I like him. I think he's funny. I know that you're not supposed to draft punters, but we got to go with him. We just have so many people out here. And last pick, another pick that we traded for is pick 240 from the Philadelphia Eagles that we traded inside of that big trade that we had. And let's see, I'm losing track of all the different people that we actually traded for. So here we're just going to go with the best player available according to PFF. Let's see, there's some running backs. I don't love the idea of at least drafting that. Let's go with let's just go with an edge, or let's go with a wide receiver, Malachi Carter. So we're just going to select that. And we're just going to continue and be done. When you get down to those farther rounds, it's crazy. So right now, here we go. We are just going to grab a screenshot of this. So the Chicago Bears, we traded our pick 242 for picks 239, or we traded 239 for picks 242, 122, 159 in the fifth round, another fifth rounder with 179, a sixth rounder 216, and a seventh rounder 240. Now, all these draft grades, these are biased. These are from PFF, so they grade based on the type of selections that you made. So you can see a lot higher picks as we go down. They grade this as an A. Congratulations. I'm going to download the image. There we go. And what we are looking at here. So I want to just bring up who we got in place of some of the other players. So if we go down to when we had our draft pick. So when we traded down, Roger McCreary was really the only guy that got selected above it. So, and we just traded down 3 picks. So let's just say that we actually, hypothetically, we traded past pick 48, because that's probably what, to get the draft pick return that we got, chances are it might be, around pick 48. So maybe you lose out on a Jalen Petrie. Maybe you lose out on a Roger McCreary. Maybe you lose out George Pickens and Jaquan Brisker. But really what we saw is that there's a lot of still really good talent. Like, think about that. If we traded down and got a Chad Muma instead, or a Christian Harris, some linebackers, or a Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. So there's a lot of really good players that the Bears could still get even if they trade down. But what we got, just for the sake of argument, for what we got for our trade. So really, the Colts got a quarterback in Matt Corral. What we got out of our picks, we got Jalen Petrie. So let's just say pick 39 would have been McCreary for us. We got Jalen Petrie, a cornerback out of Baylor. We got at pick 4th round, 122, tackle Zach Tom out of Wake Forest, who PFF rated as a B+ selection. Then we had at pick in the round 5, 159, we got tackle Chris Paul out of Tulsa. So we got 2 tackles for that and a corner still. Then pick 179 in the 5th round, we got wide receiver Bo Melton. Then in the 6th round, 216, we got our punter, Matt Ariza. Punt God, that's already worth trading down. And we had the 7th pick, 240, Malachi Carter, the wide receiver out of Georgia Tech. Honestly, don't know too much about him because he's so far down the draft board. And this is all a live mock draft rather than pre-selected. But really, this is just, let's just end this with, I'll post this screenshot out there, but this is just the benefit of trading down. We had a very lucky trade to move back 3 picks and get this type of a draft haul. But when you see this, you have we selected multiple tackles that we can potentially be developing. We drafted a punter, but you could add additional wide receivers to really kind of duke out, and hopefully one of those people can move up. But we still drafted a talented cornerback / safety that we got with pick 42. What I'm saying is drafting or trading down might be one of the best selections, one of the best things that the Bears could do. Don't be shocked if the Bears end up doing that so that they can accumulate more picks and really start to fill out this roster. Thank you guys all so much for listening, and make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair and you